Parables from Nature. Purring when you're pleased. Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. Matthew chapter 12, verse 34. They had been licked over hundreds of times by the same mother, had been brought up on the same food, lived in the same house, learnt the same lessons, heard the same advice, and yet how different they were. Never were there two kittens more thoroughly unalike than those two. The one with an open, loving heart, which never could contain itself in its joy, but purred it out at once to all the world; the other, who scarcely ever purred at all, and that never above its breath, let him be as happy or as fond as he would. It was partly his mother's fault, perhaps, for she always set the children the example of reserve, rarely purring herself, and then only in a low tone. But poor thing, there were excuses to be made for her. She had had so many troubles. Cats generally have. Their kittens are taken away from them so often, and they get so hissed about the house when people are busy, and the children pull them about so heedlessly and make the dogs run after them, which is so irritating, that really the wonder is they ever purr at all. Nevertheless, her not feeling inclined to purr much herself was no good reason for her thinking it silly or wrong in other people to purr when they were pleased. But she did, and she and her purring daughter were always having small tiffs on the subject. Every morning, for instance, when the nice, curly-headed little boy brought the kittens a saucer of milk for his breakfast, there was sure to be a disturbance over the purring question. For even before the saucer had reached the floor, Puss Missy was sure to be there, tail and head erect and eager, singing her loudest and best, her whole throat vibrating visibly, while Puss Master, on the contrary, took his food, but said very little about it, or if ever tempted to express his natural delight, did it in so low a tone that nobody could hear without putting their ears close down to him to listen. Now this was what the mother cat called keeping up one's dignity and self-respect. So it can easily be imagined how angry she used to get with the other child. "Wretched little creature," she would say to poor Puss Missy, who, even after the meal was over, would lie purring with pleasure in front of the fire. "What in the world are you making all that noise and fuss about? Why are you to be always letting yourself down by thanking people for what they do for you, as if you did not deserve it, and had not a right to expect it? Isn't it quite right of them to feed you and keep you warm? What a shame it would be if they left you without food or fire. I am ashamed to see you make yourself so cheap by showing gratitude for every trifle. For goodness' sake, have a little proper pride, and leave off such fawning ways. Look at your brother, and see how differently he behaves. Takes everything as a matter of course, and has the sense to keep his feelings to himself, and people are sure to respect him all the more. It keeps up one's friends' interest when they are not too sure that one is pleased. But you, with your everlasting acknowledgments, will be seen through and despised very soon. Have a little more esteem for your own character, I do beg. What is to become of self-respect if people are to purr whenever they are pleased?" Puss Missy had not the least notion what would become of it in such a case, but she supposed something dreadful, so she felt quite horrified at herself for having done anything to bring it about, and made 1,000 resolutions to keep up her dignity, save self-respect from the terrible unknown fate in store, and purr no more. But it was all in vain. As soon as ever anything happened to make her feel happy and comfortable, throb went the little throat, as naturally as flowers come out in spring, and there she was in a fresh scrape again. And the temptations were endless. The little boy's cousin, pale and quiet, and silent as she was, would often take Puss Missy on her knee and nurse her for half an hour at a time, stroking her so gently and kindly, how could anyone help purring? Or the boy would tie a string with a cork at the end of it to the drawer handle of a table, so that the kittens could paw it and pat it and spring at it as they pleased. How was it possible not to give vent to one's delight in the intervals of such a game, when the thing was swinging from side to side before their very eyes, inviting the next bound? And when there was nothing else to be pleased about, there were always their own tails to run after, and the fun was surely irresistible and well deserved a song. Yet the brother very seldom committed himself in that way. That was the great puzzle, and Puss Missy grew more perplexed as time went on. Nay, once when they were alone together, and her spirits had quite got the better of her judgment, she boldly asked him, in as many words, "Why do you not purr when you are pleased?" as if it was quite the natural and proper thing to do. Whereat he seemed quite taken by surprise, but answered at last, "It's so weak-minded, mother says. I should be ashamed. Besides," he added, after a short pause, "to tell you the truth, but don't say anything about it, when I begin, there's something that chokes a little in my throat. Mind you, don't tell. It would let me down so in mother's eyes. She likes one to keep up one's dignity, you know." Had Mother Puss overheard these words, she might have been a little startled by such a result of her teaching, but, as it was, she remained in happy ignorance that her son was influenced by anything but her advice. Yet, strange to say, she had that choking in the throat sometimes herself. But at last a change came in their lives. One day their friend, the curly-headed boy, came bounding into the kitchen, where Puss and her kittens were asleep, in raptures of delight, followed by the pale, quiet, silent cousin, as quiet and silent as ever. The boy rushed to the kittens at once, took up both together in his hands, laid one over the other for fun, and then said to the girl, "Cousin, now they're going to give us the kittens for our very own. Just tell me which you like best, really. I'm so afraid you won't choose for yourself when they ask you, and then if I have to choose instead, I shan't know which you would rather have. And I want you to have the one you like most, so do tell me beforehand." "Oh, I like them both," answered the girl, in the same unmoved, indifferent tone in which she generally spoke. "So do I," replied her cousin, "but I know which I like best for all that, and so must you, only you won't say. I wonder whether you like to have the kittens at all," added he, looking at the pale child a little doubtfully, then whispering, as he put them both to her face to be kissed, "Cousin dear, I wish I could see when you were pleased by your face. See, give a smile when the one you like best goes by. Do, won't you, this once, just for once?" It was in vain. He passed the kittens before her in succession, that she might see the markings of their fur, but she still only said she liked both, and, of course, was glad to have a kitten, and so on, till at last he was disheartened and asked no more. It is a great distress to some people when their friends will not purr when they are pleased, and as the children went back together to the drawing-room, the little boy was the sadder of the two, though he could not have explained why. And then, just what he expected happened. The choice between the two kittens was offered first to the girl, but instead of accepting it as a favor and saying thank you for it, and being pleased as she ought to have been, she would say nothing but that she liked both, and it could not matter which she had. Nay, to look at her as she spoke, nobody would have thought she cared for having either at all. How was it that she did not observe how sorrowfully her aunt was gazing at her as she spoke? Ay, and with a sorrow far beyond anything the kittens could occasion. But she did not, and presently her aunt said, "Well, then, as she did not care, the boy should choose." On which the poor boy colored with vexation. But when he had sought his cousin's eyes, again and again in vain, for some token of her feelings, he laid sudden hold of Puss Missy, and cuddled her against his cheek, exclaiming, "Then I will have this one. I like her much the best, mother, because she purrs when she is pleased." And the little girl took up Puss Master and kissed him very kindly, but went away without saying another word. And so a week passed, and though the children nursed their kittens, they never discussed the question of which was liked best again, for a shyness had sprung up about it ever since the day the choice had been made. But at the end of the week, one sunshiny morning, when the boy was riding his father's pony, and only the little girl was in the house, her aunt, coming suddenly into the schoolroom, discovered her kneeling by the sofa, weeping a silent rain of tears over the fur coat of Puss Missy, who was purring loudly all the time, while her own kitten, Puss Master, was lying asleep, unnoticed, by the fire. Now the pale, silent little girl had been an orphan nearly 2 years, father and mother having died within a few weeks of each other, and she had been, ever since, till quite lately, under the care of a guardian who, though married, had no children, and was more strict and well-intentioned than kind and comprehending. So that between sorrow at first and fear afterwards, joined to a timid, shrinking nature, she had, without knowing anything about it, shut herself up in a sort of defensive armor of self-restraint, which, till now, neither aunt nor uncle, nor even loving cousin, had been able to break through. But they had gently bided their time, and the time had come at last, and Puss Missy pointed the moral, for, with her aunt's arms folded around her, and a sense of her comforting tenderness creeping into the long, lonely heart, she owned that she had fretted all the week in secret, because it was so miserable to nurse a kitten who would not purr when he was pleased. Anybody may guess how nice it was, 10 minutes afterward, to see the little girl with the roused color of warm feeling on her cheeks, smiling through her tears at the thought of how like the unpurring kitten she had been herself. Anybody may guess, too, with what riotous joy the loving boy cousin insisted on her changing kittens at once, and having Puss Missy for her very own. And now, on the other hand, he set to work himself, with a resolute heart, to make Puss Master so fond of him that purr he must, whether he would or no, and how that, now and then, by dint of delicate attentions, such as choice morsels of food and judicious rubbing under the ears, he worked the creature up to such a pitch of complacency that the vibrations of his throat became, at any rate, visible to sight and perceptible to touch. Truly, they were a very happy party, for after Puss Master took Puss Missy for friend, confidant, and adviser, he grew so loving and fond that he could not help showing his feelings in 1,000 pretty, pleasant ways, and the mother cat herself relaxed by degrees, perhaps because she found her kittens were not taken away, partly perhaps because Puss Missy's open-heartedness stole into her heart at last with a sense of comfort. Who knows? Certainly she left off scolding and lecturing, and would not only watch their gambols, but join in them at times herself. And if neither she nor her son ever purred quite so much or so loudly as their neighbors, the reason, no doubt, was only that tiresome choking in the throat. Why, the pale little girl herself complained of having felt something very like it during the sad 2 years before her kind aunt made her happy again. It always used to come on when she wanted to say what she felt. And perhaps there is always something that chokes in the throat when people do not purr when they are pleased. Let us hope so.